We are live. Today we will be learning and laughing out loud with Patrick Bryant, who's my featured guest today. I met him a couple of months ago, and when I initially looked at his LinkedIn profile, I was like, what the heck? How many things does he do? Apparently, a lot of things. He likes to call himself a serial software entrepreneur. So let me do the big reveal and bring Patrick with us. So here he is. Hey, Patrick.
Nice to join you.
Hey, good to have you here. Before we go any further, I wanted to say that, your background looks awesome. It's like you're an expedition. You're like Shackleton. What's happening there?
This is an old map in this house that I just bought on Capitol Hill, and I thought I'd have some fun and throw up some lights on it and see what it looked like.
No, awesome, Patrick, and I'm glad to hear that now you are in DC, which is sort of my neighborhood. So welcome to the DMV area, taxation without representation. Good luck.
Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. So Patrick, we have a lot of questions for you, and today we'll be talking to Patrick about a lot of things about his entrepreneurial ventures, about pivoting, scalability, minimum viable product. So stay tuned in. But before that, I'd like Patrick to introduce himself to the audience. So go ahead, Patrick. It's all yours.
Thanks so much. My name's Patrick Bryant. I was born in South Carolina and spent a lot of my time in Charleston, South Carolina, and recently bought a place here on Capitol Hill in DC, and excited to get involved in the DC entrepreneurial startup scene. My main focus in life is software entrepreneurship. I love to start companies, and my favorite thing about the early stage is when you've just got that blank sheet of paper and you're trying to figure an idea out, and then suddenly you hit something that is capable of scaling and hit upon an idea, and then you put together a team and really build it. I like to have companies when they're less than 10 employees. Around 10, I start to get a little frustrated with HR issues, and it's not my favorite place anymore. By 20 employees, you want me to leave. I don't babysit well, and I like to move on to the next blank slate. But so I've done that. I'm on my seventh at bat right now, seventh company, and I had a couple of exits and a couple of shutdowns and a couple of sell off the assets. So I've had all the badges, but started out in broadcast television 24 years ago. Started my first company, and that now has 20 offices around the United States and is the largest provider of video crews throughout the U.S. and does a lot of broadcast work. I'm still involved as a partner, but no longer day-to-day operational at all. And then from there, moved on to a rolling papers company called Shine Rolling Papers, a software company called Teamforia, and then Event.Gives. And now my big focus right now is a software company called Code and Trust, that we do software development for entrepreneurs and corporations that are starting new pieces of software. So we love to start at the beginning and iterate and create that minimum viable product that then is able to get market feedback and use that to continue to build the product. So our company's built on those philosophies, and we help entrepreneurs and companies work through that process.
Perfect. As I said, when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, you do so many things, and we want to get into MVP. We want to get into, that piece of paper where you start a business. But before that, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to throw a curveball, right? And you know that, right? And even before that, I love that comment you made that, with 10 employees or less than 10 employees is your sweet spot. That's the kind of feeling that I've had for myself also. Often when I worked with clients, coaching or training them, I get a lot of job offers, and I tell them, I said, hey, my kind of person, you probably love me for a couple of days, then you'll hate me because I'll keep pushing the wrong buttons, right? So I totally get what you mean. So thank you for that lovely introduction. And before we get into a lot of business talk, let me ask you this. What is the worst job you ever had, Patrick?
Oh my gosh, it's so easy. When I was in college, I agreed to work on the wash pit of a car dealership, washing cars. And I agreed to do it for 2 weeks. A friend of mine, his dad was involved in the dealership, and somebody was going on vacation, and they asked me to wash cars, and I agreed because it sounded like a little bit of fun for a college student in the summer. And after day 2, I was convinced I never wanted to wash cars again. Quite frankly, didn't want to do anything manual labor again in my life, and I wanted to quit, but I'll tell our viewers, even then I was incredibly disciplined, and I stuck it out for the 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they offered me 2 more weeks, and I absolutely declined that opportunity.
Wow, what a wonderful story. It's funny, before I say anything further, we've had a few comments. So Rhonda, Musara, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for liking our post. And Irina also logged in. She's saying, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you also. So just based on your little story, I just thought of something, Patrick. When I was in college, we had this professor who was taking it was a design something course. I forgot. But he shared his story that how he got into engineering school. He said that he used to work in a construction site, manual labor. And one day there was an accident. And unfortunately, someone died. Okay. But the way he told that story was really funny. So he said that when that person died, the first thing I heard from the foreman is that, hey, someone better clock him out. And that's when I thought that, man, this is what it is. I need to do something better with life. So that's how he got into engineering. So thanks for sharing that car wash story. Just reminded me of that. Now let's get back to some of the things that you've been working on. So Patrick, as an entrepreneur, you mentioned that you look for companies with less than 10 employees to invest in, or to build them and scale them. What are some of the things that you look for when investing or partnering with a new organization?
Well, of course, it starts with the idea, right? And then second, immediately, is the people. I'm almost always betting on the jockey more than the horse. The horse has to the horse has to have legs. Even a good jockey can't run a kind of crazy idea, but as long as it's a basic, reasonable idea, then I'm looking for the team. And at our level, when you're working with companies that are doing a small amount of revenue and maybe a couple of employees, or maybe just the founder. I mean, most of the time I've started just with me and another founder. And in that case, it's all about that you're going to be playing, right? And you're going to be working together, and you're going to be really jamming on this thing. So if you don't enjoy being around that person or helping, move their idea forward, then none of it's really worth it for me, even if there is a big money payout. And I've had those situations where I've just had a partner that we weren't a good fit. Either I didn't necessarily align with them on ethics, or on even just when you get frustrated and you have to have a fight. Some people that just doesn't go well. And I learned very early on that if it doesn't feel good, then get out and move on to something else.
Absolutely. And I agree with that was a great analogy of the jockey and the horse. So yes, jockey. I mean, and a lot of times people invest. The idea is basic. The idea is not something which is, wow, this has not happened before, because there are very few ideas like that. It's usually the person, right? It's usually the person who you believe in. And if you have a horse, that's great, but if you have a zebra and you expect that to convert into a horse, that's not possible, right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, I again, most of the time, if you got the right jockey, they probably already have some experience of their idea and they understand what they're going after. Really good entrepreneurs have that and are prepared in that way. So most of the time, it's the person, because good people don't work on bad ideas. But there are ideas I get pitched constantly, ideas that are really good ideas that just aren't my wheelhouse. I mean, I got pitched a great idea a couple of years ago that has been incredibly successful since, but it was in the biomedical space. And I don't do biomedical. I'm not that interested in fighting with the FDA to get something approved. And that's just not my space. And so I introduced them to a friend of mine. And since then, they've taken off like a rocket ship. And I'm really happy and proud and even put a little money in just to help them move forward. But really, for me, that's what I'm looking for is the person.
Very cool. And I just want to build on that. So, I mean, you have made it very clear that you're not interested in the biomedical space. What kind of industries or types of businesses, you are interested in? What are you looking for?
So I've been in media for 25 years. So broadcast media obviously is my specialty, and then kind of team that up with software, and anything that touches those two spaces makes a lot of sense and fits my skill set nicely. So our current company, Event.Gives, is a great example where it started out as a piece of software for nonprofits, and now it's moved into video because of some of our expertise in that area. So it really software, media. I did do a product-based business in the rolling paper industry a few years ago, and really enjoyed physical products, but spend most of my time in software.
Okay. And so, hey, anyone out there who's in media, broadcast, reach out to Patrick. But make sure that you go in all prepared, because he's going to ask you some tough questions. And speaking of tough questions, you mentioned earlier that, and you know what? One of the things which happens when you are in a business and you're partnering with someone, sometimes and a lot of times, some conflict is good because it gives birth to a lot of good ideas, right?
100%.
But not to the extent that you stop talking to each other, right? So I wanted the audience to understand from your perspective that when you want to partner with the company or invest in it, what are some of the key, performance indicators that you're looking at that you say, hey, you know what? This is the real deal. I want to talk more. What are some of those things that you look at?
Well, the number one thing I pay attention to is some sort of traction in the marketplace, right? I mean, it's all about customers, and is somebody paying attention to this idea? And I've had my own ideas, easily 10 in my life, that we have said, hey, this is a good idea. Let's play with this. Let's go run with it. And then we find out that no one cares. It's just not, we thought it was a need in the marketplace, but it's not a need. And I'll give an example. I had an idea a few years ago around some digital dashboard wall boards where you put up a projector and have a bunch of, graphs and metrics for your business on it. And I'm not saying you can't be successful with that in that piece of software, but what we created in about 2 weeks, we took to our closest contacts that we thought we could get it sold, and it didn't resonate. They weren't interested in it. They didn't want to pay a lot of money for it. And at the end of the day, we scrapped it and decided, hey, this isn't the right fit. However, that business partner who I was working with on that idea went on to found Event.Gives, which is that software that helps scale it. So sometimes, you're going to meet people and you're going to go run on an idea, and it's not going to work because it's not going to have market traction. And that is okay. Get get out of that quickly or pivot off to something else that does make more sense, and keep those relationships.
Absolutely. And we talked about this before, when we were talking about this, doing this together. This pandemic happened, and my heart goes out to a lot of business owners who really did not have a choice to pivot. We all talk about pivot but in a lot of cases it's not possible. You, however, with one of your businesses, were able to do that, and I wanted you to share that story with the audience, how you were able to pivot, and now it's doing a lot better than before.
Yeah, I shout out to every entrepreneur that got crushed during COVID. There was so much unfairness in that particular market. If you had an eating establishment that was too small and unable to take on takeout, you got crushed, and that had nothing to do with you as an entrepreneur. That's just market conditions going completely sideways. And so that was really frustrating for us. At that same time, Event.Gives did basically 98% of its revenue was in-person galas and events. So think, we're renting out the ballroom and we're going to have 300 people in there, and we're going to use Event.Gives to sell our tickets and host our auction and do our paddle raise, but all that's based on people showing up at a place. And so in March, we lost every event in the country, and the revenue actually went negative for Event.Gives because people were refunding tickets for the future. And so we really were in a huge moment of just terror is the right word, where we had no ability to move forward with the company. However, we did have a strong network of auctioneers and event organizers. And the number one thing we heard from our market was from the event organizers saying, we are dead in the water. We are not going to be able to hold our event this year. And that is over, sometimes 20, 50% of that nonprofit's budget for the entire year. And
Wow.
so we saw a huge need in the marketplace immediately. And as good entrepreneurs, my business partner, Sam Staley, went out in the world and created a live streaming video live auction platform. So we already had some expertise in live streaming video, but we were able to create a tool that was perfect for live auctioneers to do live video and still have those bids, have those donations, have all of that happen live and instantly with zero latency on the platform. So suddenly, a month into the COVID crisis, we've got a new tool, an ability to go completely virtual and hold the same events that we were gonna hold, selling tickets to the virtual event, checking people in the same way you would in person, and then being able to let them bid and donate on items the way they would if they were at that gala. And it blew up like a rocket ship. The live auctioneers needed it. We didn't realize how dead in the water they as an industry and their profession was. And so when we gave them this tool, they were just ecstatic and jumped on board and started using it in a big way. But the number one thing they did for us that we can't repay, I mean, they were customers, but we valued them immensely because they told us what we needed to build. We would build a feature and we would release it into the wild to the live auctioneers, and they would use it and they would come back and say, that was great. Can it do this? Can it do that? I wish it didn't do this. And that market feedback is really what drove Event.Gives over the next year. So here we are almost a year later, and Event.Gives for the second quarter, its revenues were off by 55%. So second quarter of 2020, we were off by 55%.
I think I'm getting a heart attack just listening to that.
Right. I know. Me too. It was a painful quarter. But by fourth quarter, we were up by 368% from the 2019 fourth quarter. So and that's we're essentially we doubled revenue with that product in 2020, and we absolutely will double, if not more, in 2021. So it's just a perfect story of looking for that market need, being in that place where you're already an expert in that particular field, and then being able to say, how do we field this and get a minimum viable product into the world, and listen to market feedback, iterate on it, and then go to work with sales and marketing to get it in everyone's hands as quickly as possible. So super exciting story that I'm really proud of from the last year, and having to pivot during that ridiculously bad time.
Super exciting story. It's fascinating. I think you should, get someone to write a case study on it, possibly do some more videos on it, because people need to hear this out. And your timing is so perfect. You talked about the minimum viable product, MVP. We'll get into that. Before that, I just wanted to talk to the audience about pivot. Pivot, a lot of times we think of it as a really fancy term, but there are a lot of ways that a lot of businesses, not every business, but a lot of businesses can pivot. And what I see in my experience working with business owners is that we are so used to a particular way of solving a customer's problem that we just do not like to move away from that position. And that's probably one of the initial problems we have when you're thinking of pivoting. And all I want to say on that, because we don't have a lot of time here, is that, whatever we sell, whatever our product is, service is, it's end of the day, it's not about really us. It's about the customer. If your customer is really getting the benefit out of it, your channel of delivery, the way you do it, doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And we all have to make tough decisions. And, Patrick talked about some of the decisions that he made. Now, before we get back to Patrick and talk about the MVP, I'm going to share 3 tactics on how to, develop an MVP, a minimum viable product, which is another fancy term, right? But it's really simple. Now, to do that, I have to do a couple of things. Patrick, I'm going to take you off screen for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you if you see me. Do you still see me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So now what I'm going to ask you is to, when the screen pops up, you go ahead and read what's there and I'll carry forward. Are we good with that?
Sure.
Okay. So here we go. What do you see on the screen?
We've got 3 tactics of the minimum viable product to develop a minimum viable product.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Patrick. So 3 tactics to develop a minimum viable product. And what that means basically is having your product or service with minimum features, which solves a problem. And before we get into the tactics, let me give you a simple analogy of what an MVP is. And the simplest way to look at it is, a small house, which I think is smaller than the townhouse you have there, Patrick. So, if you look at a house, if you cannot buy a huge house, you're not going to go out and live on the road. You buy a smaller house, right? With your basic needs met, safe and secure. And that's an MVP. It solves a particular problem for your customer with minimum features. Now, based on that, I just wanted to highlight what an MVP is not. So this is what an MVP is not. Updates, bigger house, more bedrooms, more bathrooms, bigger living room. That's not an MVP. So I hope that's clear. With that, let's move into tactic number 1. And it's really about focusing on the problem you're solving for your future customer. And I know we have heard this a lot from a lot of people that, you have to solve a particular problem. And, it makes sense. It's perfect. Unless or until you're solving a problem for your customer better than the next person, there's no need for you. Because there's already someone out there who's doing something similar. Now, I understand that as entrepreneurs, we are passionate. We think that what we have, no one has. Yes, I understand that too. But I'll tell you what, the person who defines that what you're doing is of quality work is your customer. So unless or until your customer says that, whatever we think of stays with us. So focus on the problem you are solving for your customer. Quick example on that, it's probably what everyone knows of Airbnb, right? A couple of guys who were too broke to rent, so they converted their living room with a mattress so they can rent it out, and voila, they said, you know what, this could actually work. So they built a website around it and started renting out, and that's how Airbnb was born, to solve a specific problem for their customer. Let's go to tactic number 2. Analyze your competitors. And I said this before, we might have the shiny object. We might think that what we have is so unique that no one has it. But guess what? There's someone out there who's probably offering, if not exactly the same thing, something similar. Okay. And the number one mistake we can make is not look at the competition, right? And looking at the competition has a lot of benefits. And to me, one of the biggest benefits is that, I'll probably learn something about my product and service. So always look at the competition. Just to give you an example, before there was the first iPod, there were many MP3 players, right? They did it better, sure, but MP3 players were there. Before Facebook, there was MySpace. So the idea was there. These folks came in, they did it better, and that's what needs to be done. Lastly, tactic number 3. Chalk out the future customer experience. As I said earlier, it's about the customer. It's about how, one of the best analogies I think of when I think of the customer experience is a 5-star hotel. When you enter the hotel and when you exit the hotel, that entire experience is what the customer experience is about, how they felt, how they were treated. And that's what customer experience is about. So to build a minimum viable product, we have to at least keep those things in mind. One of the best examples that I can think of is Zappos. I'm pretty sure you've heard of Zappos, the online shoe store. And that idea was also born out of, building an MVP. How do I help people to buy shoes online? And initially what they focused on was, how do our customers find us and how do they buy shoes from us? That's it, really. Now, I know there are a lot of other moving pieces, but these 3 tactics are critical to begin with when you are building an MVP, a minimum viable product. Focus on the problem you solve, learn about your competition, and lastly, chalk out the entire customer experience. So in short, that was my brief on the 3 tactics to develop a minimum viable product. Building on that, I want to go to our guest today because I don't want to leave him alone and get his inputs on MVP because he's the master. He invests in companies, so he knows all about that. What do you have to say, Patrick?
I love it. All those analogies make perfect sense. And I especially believe wholeheartedly in your piece about competitors, because many times people say 2 things to me. They'll say, oh, I have this great idea, but I don't want to tell you about it because I don't want you to steal it because I know you can run with it. And normally what I'll tell them is, do you know what your idea is currently worth? 0, because it has no revenue. And if you keep it in your head, then it's not going to ever get out into the world. And really, regardless of how good the idea is, it's all about the implementation. It's all about being able to create a minimum viable product, get it in front of customers, and flow the cycle, just like you were just talking about. The other side of that is people will say to me, oh my gosh, I got this great idea, and then I Googled it, and there's already people doing it. So I'm probably not going to run with it. And to which I say, well, if there's no one doing it, there's probably no market validation of the need for what you're proposing. And it is a lot easier to go into a business, as you mentioned, with the iPod and Facebook, where things were already being done in that space. It was the moment and the time for those industries to take off. But that market validation existed because some things were already out there, and they were just going to do it in a better, more interesting way. So I love all those points, and they're spot on.
No, awesome, thank you. And it's funny you said that, because even with the iPod, it's funny, when I go back to Steve Jobs' initial presentation, when the big wow factor was 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? Because we didn't have the 4G, 5G, all of that. So at that time, 1,000 songs was a big deal. But also, if you think about it, even with something like an iPod, it was an old idea, right? We all remember our, Sony Walkman, right?
Right.
So a lot of times, an innovative or a new idea is something which was done before, but we gave it up, and someone thought of it, saw it, and hey, you know what? Let me bring it out. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree completely. There's this other spectrum that we try to pay attention to. That ideas can be too early and too late, and there's many times where we really think something's going to work, and we deploy it into the market, and no one cares, and we think, what? Why do you not care? This is critically important, and they don't see it at that moment. There's not a need. And what we'll do is we'll literally say, okay, hey, this is a good idea, but its time just isn't there yet. So let's just put it on the shelf, and let's pull that feature out later when people seem to care about it a little more. I'll tell you another little quick trick that we do in the feature set business. If we're in our software and we say, this is a big idea, we need to integrate with this other company, or we need to make a button that does this thing, then we'll say, well, let's go ahead and put the button on our software, and let's gray it out, and let's put coming soon with a button that you can click to be notified when that's there. Well, the beauty of that is you just told me, you validated that button needs to exist by signing up to find out when it will exist. If no one clicks that button to find out if it's going to ever exist, then we will never build it.
Very cool. Very cool. And Patrick, going back to something that you said, that, you come up with an idea or a product or a service, and then you realize that no one cares. How come no one cares? So timing is one thing, I think. And it also has to go back to, learning about your competition. If when I used to work for a bank, one of the things which I used to hate, anytime I had this new idea, I used to go to the president and say, hey, you know what, I'm excited. And the first thing he used to ask me is any other bank using it? And I used to hate that question. I used to hate that question, but it made a lot of sense, right? So either your pitch needs to be better, right? You cannot just go in with your emotions that your idea is great. And I wanted to actually, we have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you, when now that you are looking out for new businesses, or what are some of the new things you're looking at? What is the next big thing, or what are some of the new ideas that you're looking for to invest in?
Honestly, right now, my mainstay businesses keep me incredibly busy, including Code and Trust that does software development. And so Code and Trust is seeing all kinds of innovative ideas that we're helping develop the software for. I'll just highlight one, though, that I think everybody should be paying attention to, and it's almost sophomoric to say it at this point, but blockchain is going to change the universe. And I personally believe blockchain right now is where the internet was in 97, 98, maybe. AOL and CompuServe still had a place in the world, and search engines were trying to figure out what they meant. And I think that's what we're going to see with digital currencies across the board. And then, of course, other blockchains that are for title insurance, or storing our fingerprints, or all kinds of things. But digital currency, I think, is gonna be a huge opportunity with all kinds of software needs, spinoff, and things that will be developed around it. So I don't even think that I'm talking about necessarily, oh, you need to go build the next altcoin to compete with Bitcoin. What I'm saying is there are going to be 10,000 ideas around blockchain and digital currency that are support softwares and transaction softwares in different industries that we haven't even envisioned yet, that are going to be coming down the pipe. And so I really do think that Bitcoin is going to end up being its own industry, and Ethereum is going to be its own industry, and they're going to have two completely different product offerings in the world, and they're both going to be needed, and are going to be huge investments for the next. I think it'll take at least 15, 20 years for that model to play out, but I think it's so in its infancy, and we're super excited about it.
Wow. Hey guys, you heard it first here, right? What Patrick talked about. And also, I never thought that I will hear the word CompuServe again. CompuServe, one of the first things that we used to get on the internet. I remember. Very cool. Very cool. So Patrick, how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way to find you out?
Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn. They can search me out, or they can check out our website, which is Code and Trust, spelled out, codeandtrust.com. And that has details on our software development company and my business partners and some of our projects.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Patrick. Before you go, one last question. This is a question I ask everyone. And I've had people who actually prepared for this question, but I don't think you have. So we'll give it a try. Let's see. Here we go. If heaven exists and when you arrive at the pearly gates, what do you want God to say to you?
Well, I would hope and pray that he would say, "Good job," that I would have made a difference in the world in a way that shaped it in a positive outcome and improved people's lives through the products and the services that we created, and my business partners that are around me, that I lifted them up and helped them move forward. So good job would be what I would want to hear.
Very cool, Patrick. And one thing, if I must say, that your pitch to God is a very entrepreneurial pitch. I love it. Awesome, man. Awesome. I'd like to thank every person who tuned in and gave us a listen. Me and Patrick obviously had a lot of fun sharing a lot of thoughts on entrepreneurship. Do get in touch with Patrick. He's someone who's very approachable. Although the background where he's sitting right now seems like he's on a ship, but he's in DC. I can guarantee you that. So reach out to him if you want to talk to him, discuss any ideas. Or if you have an idea you want an investor or someone to help you out, reach out to Patrick. I'm pretty sure he'll give you some time. And that's it. Any parting thoughts, Patrick?
Thank you for having me. I just love entrepreneurs. I love the entire process, and building companies is just my favorite thing, and hanging out with those that have done it is my second favorite thing. So anything I can do to help someone else move forward, I'm happy to do it.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Love the spirit, and we are going off.